It was an unusually crisp evening in Chicago, the kind that teased the promise of a story waiting to unfold. The opulent restaurant known as The Court was bathed in golden light, its every corner exuding luxury and exclusivity. Glittering chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, and polished marble floors echoed softly beneath the refined murmur of wealthy diners. Among the finely dressed patrons, one figure stood out, a tall, commanding presence that moved with a confidence as natural as breathing. That figure was none other than Michael Jordan. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. Dressed in a tailored suit that seemed to merge sophistication with an air of nonchalance, Michael stepped into the restaurant that he owned, albeit secretly. The Court was one of his many ventures outside the world of basketball, a place where the city's elite gathered to indulge in gourmet cuisine and fine wines. However, Michael had deliberately kept his ownership under wraps, preferring to visit occasionally as just another customer, observing the operations and experiencing the ambiance from a guest's perspective. Tonight was one such night. As Michael entered, a young waiter named Victor noticed him from across the room. Victor, a new hire with an ambition as sharp as his tongue, had a reputation for being overly eager to assert his authority over anyone he deemed ordinary. To Victor, Michael Jordan seemed just another customer. Perhaps tall, perhaps a little familiar, but nothing more than a man seeking a meal in his territory. Michael, being a man of simple tastes despite his immense wealth, opted for a quiet table in the corner, away from the bustling center of attention. He wanted to enjoy his meal in peace, unbothered by recognition or fanfare. But as he settled into his seat, Victor approached with a demeanor that was more patronizing than professional. "Good evening," Victor began, his tone laced with a touch of disdain as he glanced at Michael's understated attire. "Are you sure you're in the right place? We don't serve burgers and fries here." Michael raised an eyebrow, amused more than offended. He leaned back in his chair, his legendary composure unshaken. "I think I'll manage," he replied smoothly, his voice carrying that unmistakable baritone that had commanded arenas and boardrooms alike. Victor, however, wasn't paying attention. His eyes darted to the polished shoes of other diners, the glittering jewelry on wrists and necks, the designer handbags perched on chairs. In comparison, Michael's appearance seemed to Victor far too modest for the grandeur of the court. Ignoring the subtle authority in Michael's tone, Victor pressed on. "Well, we have a strict dress code," Victor added, gesturing vaguely at Michael's suit as if it were somehow subpar, "and reservations are required. I don't recall seeing your name on the list." Michael's lips curled into a small smile, a smile that those familiar with him would recognize as a prelude to something interesting. "I think you'll find my name carries a little weight around here," he said, his voice calm, almost playful. Victor crossed his arms, determined to stand his ground. "Look, sir, I don't make the rules. I just enforce them. If you can't prove you belong here, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We have a reputation to uphold." Several nearby diners began to glance in their direction, sensing a confrontation brewing. Some recognized Michael immediately, their eyes widening in disbelief at the scene unfolding before them. But they said nothing. Perhaps out of curiosity or the hope of witnessing how the situation would resolve itself. Michael leaned forward slightly, his expression still one of amusement. "You're really not going to let me stay?" Victor scoffed, emboldened by what he mistook as submission. "Not unless you can prove you belong here." At that moment, the restaurant's manager, a sharp-eyed woman named Elena, entered the dining area. She had been overseeing operations in the back when she heard whispers of an altercation involving a guest. As she approached, her gaze fell on Michael and her heart skipped a beat. She knew exactly who he was and, more importantly, what this restaurant meant to him. "Is there a problem here?" Elena asked, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Victor turned to her, his expression smug. "Just handling a situation, ma'am. This gentleman doesn't seem to understand the standards we maintain here." Elena's face hardened. "And who exactly do you think you're talking to?" Before Victor could respond, Michael interjected, his tone still light but carrying an edge of authority. "It's fine, Elena. I'm curious to see how far this goes." The realization hit Victor like a freight train. His jaw slackened as he looked back at Michael, the pieces of the puzzle finally falling into place. The face on countless magazine covers, the name etched in the annals of sports history. It was him, And not just him, but the owner of the very establishment Victor had been so quick to defend with misplaced arrogance. Victor stammered, his confidence crumbling. I didn't realize... Michael stood, towering over the now visibly flustered waiter. You didn't realize because you didn't bother to look, he said, his voice steady but firm. You judged me based on what you thought you saw. That's not how we treat people here. The restaurant had fallen silent, every eye fixed on the unfolding drama. Michael turned to the onlookers, addressing them with the ease of a man who had commanded stadiums. A place like this isn't about the clothes you wear or the car you drive. It's about respect for the food, for the staff, and for every guest who walks through those doors. Elena stepped forward, her expression a mix of embarrassment and resolve. Mr. Jordan, I deeply apologize for this misunderstanding. This is not how we operate. Michael waved her off. Mistakes happen. What matters is how we fix them. He turned back to Victor, who stood frozen, his face pale. You've got potential, Michael said, surprising everyone. But you've got a lot to learn. Start by treating everyone with the respect you'd want for yourself. With that, Michael reclaimed his seat, signaling to Elena that he intended to stay for his meal. The atmosphere in the restaurant slowly returned to normal, though a buzz of excitement lingered as diners whispered about what they had just witnessed. Victor, meanwhile, was left to grapple with the lesson he had just learned. It wasn't every day you found yourself insulting one of the greatest basketball players of all time, let alone the owner of your workplace. Humbled and chastened, he resolved to approach his job with a newfound sense of humility and professionalism. As for Michael, he enjoyed his meal with the quiet satisfaction of knowing that the court would continue to uphold the values he cherished, not just excellence in food and service, but a commitment to treating every guest with dignity, regardless of appearances. And in the days that followed, the story of that night became something of a legend, a tale retold with awe and admiration, a reminder that greatness isn't just about achievements, but about the character that underpins them. As the night wore on, the vibrant hum of conversation and the clinking of glasses gradually reclaimed the atmosphere of the court. Michael Jordan, still seated at his corner table, seemed entirely unbothered by the earlier encounter. He observed the restaurant around him with a discerning eye. Every detail had been meticulously designed to embody both elegance and comfort, an extension of his personal philosophy. His vision for the court was not merely to create a luxury restaurant, but to establish a space where anyone, from the city's elite to a casual diner, could feel welcomed without pretense. His gaze lingered on Victor, who was now moving carefully through the room, his posture visibly altered. The young waiter, though shaken, had thrown himself back into his duties with a newfound attentiveness, as if determined to salvage the night and perhaps his job. Victor's movements lacked the arrogant swagger they had carried before. Instead, they were careful, almost overly polite, as though he were trying to undo the impression he had made earlier. Michael's meal was exquisite, a showcase of culinary artistry from an award-winning chef he had personally recruited. But the food, no matter how perfect, wasn't what preoccupied him at that moment. He found himself reflecting on the night's events, pondering the fine line between ambition and arrogance, a balance he had mastered over decades of navigating fame, success, and scrutiny. Michael's journey from a young, hungry athlete to a global icon had taught him countless lessons about humility and the importance of staying grounded, no matter how high the pedestal. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Elena paced nervously. The manager, though typically composed, was wrestling with the weight of the evening's mishap. She prided herself on running a tight ship, and tonight's incident felt like a personal failure. When Michael Jordan walked into a room, it wasn't just another customer. He was the heart and soul behind the restaurant. To have him treated with anything less than the utmost respect was a blemish on her leadership. Elena made a decision. She stepped out of the kitchen and approached Michael's table. Clearing her throat softly, she spoke. Mr. Jordan, may I have a moment of your time? Michael looked up from his meal, his sharp eyes meeting hers. Of course, Elena, sit down, he said, gesturing to the seat across from him. Elena hesitated but obliged, smoothing her apron as she sat. I wanted to personally apologize for what happened earlier. Victor's behavior was unacceptable, and I take full responsibility for it. I should have ensured he understood the values we uphold here." Michael studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "I appreciate that, Elena," he said finally, "but it's not entirely on you. The kid's young. We've all been there, thinking we know it all." Elena nodded, grateful for his understanding, but still resolute. "I'm going to have a serious conversation with him. This can't happen again." Michael leaned forward slightly, his tone soft but firm. "Elena, mistakes happen. What matters is whether we learn from them. The kid's got a lot to prove, but he's got potential. Don't be too hard on him. Let him grow." Elena's admiration for Michael deepened in that moment. Here was a man who could have demanded instant dismissal, could have turned the incident into a spectacle, but instead, he chose to focus on the bigger picture. It was a lesson in leadership she wouldn't forget. Across the room, Victor was feeling the weight of his mistake in full force. He overheard murmurs from diners, snippets of conversation that made his ears burn. "Can you believe it? Michael Jordan owns this place, and that kid insulted him?" Victor wanted to disappear into the floor. But as embarrassed as he was, he couldn't deny the clarity the experience had given him. He had come to this job with the wrong mindset, seeing it as a stepping stone to something greater rather than as a chance to truly learn and grow. Tonight had been a humbling wake-up call. Determined to make amends, Victor approached Elena in the kitchen after his shift. "Miss Elena," he began, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him, "I want to apologize for what happened tonight. I messed up, and I take full responsibility. If Mr. Jordan wants me gone, I'll understand, but if you give me another chance, I promise I'll do better." Elena regarded him carefully. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the weight of realization that only an experience like tonight's could bring. "You're lucky Mr. Jordan is a patient man," she said finally. "But understand this, you've got one chance to prove you can live up to the standards we set here. Don't waste it." Victor nodded fervently. "I won't, thank you." That night, after the last of the diners had left and the restaurant was quiet, Michael lingered at his table, savoring the stillness. Elena approached him once more, a cautious hope in her expression. "Victor apologized," she said. "He seems genuinely sorry." Michael nodded. "Good. Now let's see if he can back it up." The next few weeks brought a noticeable transformation in Victor. He threw himself into his work with a diligence that surprised everyone. He arrived early, stayed late, and took every opportunity to learn from his colleagues. He made it a point to treat every guest with the utmost respect, regardless of their appearance or perceived status. His arrogance was replaced with humility, his confidence tempered with empathy. One evening, as Victor was meticulously setting a table, he noticed Michael walk in. This time there was no mistaking him. Victor straightened his posture and approached him with a calm, collected demeanor. "Good evening, Mr. Jordan," he said, his voice steady. "Welcome back. Would you like your usual table?" Michael smiled, impressed by the transformation. "That'd be great, Victor. Thanks." Throughout the night, Victor ensured that Michael's experience was flawless, attentive without being intrusive. By the end of the meal, Michael called him over. "You've come a long way, kid," Michael said, his tone warm but measured. "Keep this up, and you'll do just fine." Victor's chest swelled with pride. "Thank you, Mr. Jordan. I won't let you down." Word of Victor's redemption spread among the staff, becoming a testament to the culture Michael had fostered within the court. It wasn't just about serving fine food in a luxurious setting. It was about growth, resilience, and the willingness to learn from mistakes. Victor's journey became an unspoken reminder to everyone that true success wasn't measured by status or appearances, but by character and effort. As the restaurant continued to thrive, it became a beacon of excellence not just in cuisine but in values. Michael's influence was felt in every detail, from the impeccable service to the camaraderie among the staff. The story of that fateful night, the waiter who insulted the owner without knowing it, became a legend within the court, retold with a mixture of humor and reverence. Years later, when Victor had risen through the ranks to become a manager at another establishment, he often thought back to that night. It was a turning point, a moment that had reshaped not just his career, but his outlook on life. He carried the lessons Michael had imparted with him, striving to lead with the same grace and integrity. And as for Michael, he continued to visit the court, always unannounced, always blending in with the guests. He knew that the true measure of his success wasn't in the accolades or the profits, but in the culture he had built. A culture that valued respect, humility, and the endless pursuit of excellence. In the grand tapestry of Michael Jordan's life, the restaurant was just one thread, but it was a thread woven with care, intention, and a commitment to something greater than himself. It was a reflection of the man he had become, a man who knew that greatness wasn't just about soaring above others, but about lifting them up along the way. And that, perhaps, was the greatest legacy of all. The transformation at the court following that unforgettable evening continued to ripple outward in ways that no one could have anticipated. For Victor, the once arrogant waiter, the moment had reshaped not only his career but his entire perspective. He threw himself into understanding the hospitality industry, devouring books on customer service, shadowing senior staff, and even volunteering to assist in the kitchen when extra hands were needed. Slowly but surely, he carved a reputation as one of the most attentive and knowledgeable waiters in the restaurant. Victor began to notice nuances that had once escaped him. The way a regular diner hesitated before ordering, perhaps unsure of a wine pairing, or how a new customer's body language suggested they needed a little extra attention to feel at ease. These subtleties became his expertise, and soon diners began requesting him by name. He had gone from a source of whispered ridicule to a favorite among the restaurant's most loyal patrons. But the restaurant itself was also evolving. The court had always been a luxurious establishment, but Michael Jordan's presence and the lessons he imparted elevated it to something more. The staff began embracing the idea that their work was about more than just serving meals. It was about creating moments. Every guest's visit became an opportunity to offer an experience they wouldn't forget. Michael's philosophy had always centered on the relentless pursuit of excellence, and that mindset became the restaurant's unofficial mantra. He believed that even the smallest details mattered, details that no guest might consciously notice, but that contributed to an overall sense of perfection. Plates were served at precise temperatures, lighting was adjusted throughout the evening to suit the mood, and music playlists were curated to complement the ebb and flow of conversation. It wasn't just about the outward polish, though. Michael made it clear that the internal culture was just as important. He held private meetings with the staff every few months, not as an owner reprimanding his employees, but as a mentor sharing his wisdom. These meetings became a cherished tradition, and the staff eagerly awaited them, knowing that Michael's words carried weight far beyond the restaurant walls. At one such meeting, he stood at the head of a long table in the restaurant's private dining room, addressing the gathered team. "I don't care how good the food is," he began, his voice calm but commanding. "If a guest leaves here feeling like they were just another customer, we've failed. Everyone who walks through that door should feel like this is their home for the night. That's what sets us apart." His words weren't just inspirational, they were actionable. He challenged the team to find creative ways to personalize the dining experience. Servers began remembering guests' names and favorite dishes, offering small gestures like custom dessert plates for anniversaries or handwritten thank you notes after a particularly special evening. The kitchen staff experimented with seasonal ingredients and bespoke menus, ensuring that even the most regular visitors had something new to look forward to. Michael's involvement didn't stop with the staff. He took an active interest in the local community, often inviting underprivileged youth to dine at the restaurant as his personal guests. For many of these young people, it was their first experience in such a luxurious setting, and Michael ensured it was one they would never forget. He would join them at the table, talking about his journey, his failures, and his successes, always emphasizing the importance of resilience and hard work. One memorable evening, Michael invited a group of high school basketball players from a struggling neighborhood to dine at the court. The boys arrived wide-eyed, their suits ill-fitting but their excitement palpable. They were seated at a table near the front, where Michael personally greeted them. Over the course of the evening, he shared stories from his career, not just the highlights but the setbacks. The times he was told he wasn't good enough, the moments of self-doubt he had to overcome. One of the boys, a lanky teenager named Marcus, gathered the courage to ask Michael a question. "How did you handle it when people didn't believe in you?" Michael leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "You know, Marcus, there were plenty of times people doubted me. But the thing is, I didn't focus on proving them wrong. I focused on proving myself right. You have to believe in yourself even when no one else does, and then work so hard that they have no choice but to see what you're capable of. The advice resonated deeply with the boys, and as they left the restaurant that night, they carried not only the memory of a luxurious meal, but a renewed sense of possibility. For Michael, moments like these were as rewarding as any championship ring. The reputation of the court continued to grow, attracting not just wealthy patrons, but also food critics, celebrities, and international tourists. Each visitor brought a new energy to the space, and the restaurant thrived under the buzz of its growing acclaim. Yet despite its increasing fame, the core ethos remained unchanged. Michael and his team worked tirelessly to ensure that every guest, whether a first-timer or a regular, felt the same warmth and care that had defined the restaurant from the start. Victor, now a seasoned member of the team, often found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this point. He had come to realize that the restaurant wasn't just a place of work, it was a reflection of something much larger. It represented the idea that greatness wasn't reserved for a select few. It was something anyone could achieve with the right mindset and effort. One evening, as Victor was closing up, he found Michael sitting alone at the bar, nursing a glass of red wine. The restaurant was quiet, the last of the diners having left moments earlier. Victor hesitated for a moment, then approached. "Mr. Jordan," he began, his voice steady but humble, "I just wanted to thank you for everything." Michael turned to him, a knowing smile on his face. "You don't have to thank me, Victor. You did the work. I just gave you a nudge." Victor shook his head. "It's more than that. You didn't just give me a job. You gave me a second chance, and you taught me what it means to really strive for something. I'll never forget that." Michael raised his glass in a silent toast. "Just remember to pay it forward," he said. "When you're in a position to help someone else, do it. That's how we keep building something bigger than ourselves." The words stuck with Victor, and as his career advanced, he carried them into every role he took on. Years later, when he opened his own small restaurant, he modeled it after the lessons he had learned at the court. He made it a point to hire young, inexperienced staff and mentor them, just as Michael had mentored him. Meanwhile, the court remained a shining jewel in Michael's portfolio. It was more than a restaurant. It was a testament to the values he held dear: excellence, humility, and the power of human connection. It stood as a reminder that true success wasn't about the accolades or the wealth, but about the impact you made on others. The story of the waiter who insulted Michael Jordan without knowing he owned the restaurant became a parable of sorts, retold by staff and patrons alike. It was a story that encapsulated the restaurant's spirit, the idea that greatness wasn't about where you started, but how you chose to grow. It was a story that inspired countless people, from diners who left with full hearts to staff who found purpose in their work. And at the heart of it all was Michael, a man who had conquered the basketball court but never stopped striving for something greater. Whether he was dazzling fans with his moves or mentoring a young waiter to believe in himself, Michael Jordan's legacy was, and always would be, about lifting others to new heights. The court was his way of ensuring that legacy endured, not just in the world of sports, but in the lives of everyone it touched. As the years passed, the court evolved into more than just a restaurant. It became a cornerstone of Michael Jordan's enduring legacy. Its story was no longer confined to its walls. The whispers of its atmosphere, the anecdotes of its staff, and the memories of its patrons spread far and wide, making it a cultural touchstone. Tourists visiting Chicago added the court to their must-see lists, not just for the chance to enjoy world-class cuisine, but for the possibility of experiencing the essence of the legend who built it. Michael continued to play an active role in the restaurant's growth, ensuring it never lost its soul despite its fame. He encouraged the staff to take pride in their roles, to see themselves not as cogs in a machine, but as creators of unique experiences. That ethos began to attract not just patrons, but also employees who were eager to be part of something special. Chefs, servers, and sommeliers from around the world sought positions at the court, knowing it was a place where their talents would be nurtured and celebrated. The restaurant also became a hub for innovation. Michael partnered with local farmers and artisans to source ingredients, investing in sustainable practices that benefited the community while elevating the quality of the menu. Seasonal dishes became an art form, with chefs experimenting boldly, always with Michael's encouragement to push boundaries. Perfection is a moving target, he often said during their meetings. If we're not improving, we're falling behind. The philanthropy Michael championed through the restaurant also expanded. In addition to hosting underprivileged youth, the court began organizing annual charity galas, where the city's elite gathered not just to dine but to support causes close to Michael's heart, such as education and sports programs for disadvantaged communities. The events were always a spectacle, blending elegance with a heartfelt purpose. Guests left not only impressed by the event's glamour, but inspired by its mission. One particularly memorable evening at the gala, a young woman named Kara, who had dined at the court years earlier as part of a youth mentorship program, was invited to speak. Now a college graduate and the first in her family to attend university, she stood on stage and spoke about how that initial visit to the restaurant had sparked a belief in herself she hadn't known she possessed. "When I sat at that table, I felt seen for the first time," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Mr. Jordan didn't just give me a meal, he showed me that I belonged in places like this. That belief stayed with me, and it's why I'm standing here today." The room erupted in applause, and Michael, standing at the back, nodded quietly. Moments like these reminded him why he had poured so much of himself into this venture. For Michael, the court was never just about food or luxury. It was a living, breathing embodiment of his values: resilience, humility, and the pursuit of excellence. It was a space where people, no matter where they came from, could find inspiration and connection. And as long as those values endured, so would the court, a legacy far greater than its walls. As the court solidified its place as a beacon of excellence in Chicago's cultural and culinary scene, its influence began to transcend the boundaries of the restaurant industry. The values instilled by Michael Jordan seeped into the city's broader identity. It wasn't uncommon to hear business leaders, educators, and artists draw inspiration from the ethos of the restaurant, citing it as a prime example of what could be achieved through a commitment to integrity, innovation, and hard work. One of the most profound impacts of the court came from its quiet but significant contributions to the lives of its employees. Michael's approach to leadership fostered a sense of belonging and empowerment among the staff, creating an environment where people felt not just valued, but essential. Many staff members who started with little experience grew into skilled professionals, going on to lead kitchens, manage other high-profile restaurants, or even open their own establishments. Michael's personal mentorship also left an indelible mark. He would occasionally invite staff members to one-on-one conversations, asking about their aspirations and challenges. These conversations were never surface level. They were probing, insightful, and always aimed at helping the individual see the potential within themselves. One dishwasher, a quiet man named Luis, once revealed during such a talk that he dreamed of becoming a pastry chef but lacked formal training. Michael arranged for Luis to attend a local culinary school, covering the costs anonymously. Years later, Luis returned to the court as its head pastry chef, his intricate creations becoming a signature highlight of the menu. The restaurant's reputation as a space of opportunity extended to the community as well. Recognizing the power of food to bring people together, Michael spearheaded the creation of culinary workshops held within the restaurant on days it was closed to the public. These workshops, led by the chefs of the court, were open to aspiring cooks from underserved neighborhoods. Participants learned not only technical skills, but also the discipline and creativity required to excel in the culinary world. Many who attended these workshops found paths to careers in the industry, with several eventually joining the team at the court. As the restaurant matured, so did its symbolism. The court became synonymous with the idea that luxury and accessibility were not mutually exclusive. Though the establishment retained its high standards, it never succumbed to exclusivity for its own sake. The restaurant partnered with local organizations to host community nights, offering prix-fixe menus at reduced prices for families who might otherwise never experience such a setting. These nights were a testament to Michael's belief that greatness should inspire and uplift, not intimidate. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on the waiter insulting Michael Jordan unknowingly in his own restaurant? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.